Welcome. Here on the Urban Herald, we're taking a deep dive today into something truly significant. We're looking ahead to 2025 and the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau.
That's right. And this anniversary, as we've been discussing here at the Urban Herald, it feels particularly critical right now. It's not just about marking a date. With anti-Semitism showing such a worrying rise globally, understanding the Holocaust feels more urgent than ever.
Absolutely. The commemorations planned around the world really highlight that urgency, don't they? For remembering, yes, but also for education.
Exactly. Education is key.
So our aim today, drawing on the work we do here at the Urban Herald, is to really explore this. Go beyond the headlines, look at the roots, the progression, and what this history means for us now. Let's start maybe with the context. What was Europe like before all this happened? What were the conditions?
Well, you have to remember, Europe in the early 20th century was incredibly unstable. World War I had left huge scars, especially on Germany. Think about it. Defeat, national humiliation, a terrible economic crisis, and then the Treaty of Versailles on top of it all.
Right, a perfect storm, in a way.
It really was. It created this breeding ground for extremism.
And anti-Semitism was already present, wasn't it? This wasn't something the Nazis just invented out of thin air.
Oh, absolutely not. Anti-Semitism had deep, deep roots in Europe going back centuries. What the Nazis were terrifyingly good at was taking that existing hatred, that prejudice, and twisting it, amplifying it, using Germany's post-war pain.
How did they do that? Propaganda.
Propaganda was massive.
Right.
Relentless propaganda combined with really savvy political moves. They weaponized anti-Semitism.
So you have this national trauma, this existing hatred being fanned into flames. What was the core ideology driving the Nazis? What did they actually believe?
At its heart was this completely false, dangerous idea about race. Racial purity, a hierarchy. They pushed these pseudoscientific theories about a superior Aryan race and labeled other groups, especially Jews, as inferior, as the enemy.
An enemy responsible for everything wrong, it seems.
Pretty much. Jews were blamed for communism, for capitalism, for Germany's problems. They became the scapegoat for everything.
It's chilling how effective that was. And as we've covered at the Urban Herald, this dehumanization was critical. It paved the way.
It was absolutely fundamental. If you constantly portray a group as less than human, as a threat, through propaganda, through speeches, through imagery, you erode empathy. You create distance. It makes it easier for people to accept or even participate in persecution and eventually mass murder.
Because the victims aren't seen as people anymore.
Precisely. They're stripped of their humanity. Language becomes a weapon.
So the ideology is taking root. How did they translate that hatred into action? What were the first steps?
It started almost right away after they took power in '33. Discriminatory laws. Jews were pushed out of government jobs, out of public life. Their citizenship could be stripped. Businesses were boycotted. And there was violence, intimidation.
And then came the Nuremberg laws in 1935. Those seem like a major escalation.
They were a huge turning point. The Nuremberg laws essentially wrote Nazi racial theories into law. They banned marriages, relationships between Jews and non-Jews, stripped remaining rights. It codified segregation, made it official state policy.
So the persecution becomes institutionalized, and as the Nazis expanded their control across Europe, things got even worse. Ghettos, the Einsatzgruppen.
Yes. As they occupied more territory, especially in the east, they forced Jewish people into ghettos. These were usually rundown, overcrowded parts of cities, sealed off. Conditions were horrific. Starvation, disease, it was deliberate. And at the same time, you had the Einsatzgruppen.
The mobile killing squads.
Right, SS death squads, moving behind the army lines, rounding up Jewish communities and murdering them, often by mass shootings. Horrific, brutal.
The scale is just hard to comprehend. Which brings us to the concept of the final solution. Our research at the Urban Herald points to the Wannsee Conference as being key here.
The Wannsee Conference, January 1942. Yes, this was less about deciding on genocide that was already happening and more about coordinating it. It was a high-level meeting to ensure the systematic extermination of Europe's Jews was carried out efficiently across all Nazi-controlled areas.
Yeah.
Chillingly bureaucratic.
Bureaucratic evil. And from Wannsee, the industrial killing machine really ramped up with the extermination camps.
Exactly. 6 main camps designed primarily or exclusively for mass murder. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno-Majdanek. The main method was poison gas, industrialized killing on an unprecedented scale.
And that doesn't even count the millions who died another way.
No. Starvation, disease in the ghettos and concentration camps, forced labor that worked people to death, the death marches at the end. The death toll was immense.
Which makes the upcoming 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau next year so profoundly important. The Urban Herald will be covering the main commemoration there. What do we expect to see?
It'll be incredibly solemn. Survivors will be there. Their presence and testimonies are irreplaceable. Heads of state, dignitaries from around the world. Survivor testimonies will be central, sharing those firsthand accounts of horror, but also resilience. Prayers, reflections. Often they have a symbolic goods wagon, a stock reminder of the deportations.
A powerful symbol. And the Urban Herald's learned this anniversary's impact goes well beyond the site itself, right? Global events.
Oh yes, it's acting as a catalyst globally.
Hmm.
Museums, schools, community groups. They're all planning educational programs, exhibitions, discussions. It's a moment to reflect on the Holocaust, but also, crucially, to confront the rising anti-Semitism we see today.
And hearing from survivors like Marian Tursky, Janina Uwaska, Tova Friedman, Leon Weintraub, their voices are essential to keep this memory alive.
Absolutely vital. Their stories carry immense weight.
It's also significant seeing world leaders publicly recommitting to Holocaust education and condemning anti-Semitism. But let's dig into the mechanics a bit more. How was this genocide actually carried out? Who did what?
Well, it was a state-run operation. The SS, Himmler's Schutzstaffel, was the main engine driving the final solution. Within the SS, you had units like the Einsatzgruppen doing the mobile killing, and then the massive camp system, concentration camps, labor camps, and the extermination camps.
Each with a specific deadly purpose.
Pretty much. And you can't forget the infrastructure. The existing railway network across Europe was absolutely critical for deporting millions of people to their deaths.
The logistics of evil, and as we've reported at the Urban Herald, certain events stand out as milestones in this dark history.
Definitely. Wannsee, as we mentioned, the opening of the extermination camps,
Mm-hmm.
the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, such incredible bravery against impossible odds, and then finally, the liberations by Allied forces.
But there was resistance too, wasn't there? And acts of rescue.
Yes, and it's so important to remember that. Resistance within the ghettos and camps, acts of sabotage, spiritual resistance, and courageous individuals, non-Jews, who risk everything to save lives. People like Irina Sendler in Poland, Karl Lutz in Hungary. There are many stories of incredible bravery.
Sparks of light in the darkness. Amidst all the numbers, the structures, the Urban Herald always tries to emphasize the human cost. Each number was a person.
Exactly. 6 million Jews murdered, 1.5 million children among them. These aren't just statistics. They're individual lives lost. Survivor testimonies, like hearing from someone like Eva Moses Kor, who survived Mengelay's experiments, they bring home the personal reality, the suffering, but also the incredible strength people found.
The impact on families must have been catastrophic. Our work at the Urban Herald has touched on the trauma of separation, of loss.
Utterly devastating. Families torn apart, parents separated from children, spouses from each other, often forever. Survivors carried not just their own trauma, but the weight of that loss. Rebuilding life was incredibly hard. And those psychological wounds, that trauma, it echoes down the generations. We're still understanding that intergenerational impact.
Which leads us straight to why Holocaust education and remembrance are so critical today, especially as the Urban Herald has documented, with anti-Semitism worryingly on the rise again.
Remembrance is our shield against forgetting, against repeating the past. It's a warning. And yes, the rise in anti-Semitism globally is deeply disturbing. It takes new forms, uses new platforms, but the underlying hatred is ancient.
And we also face the threat of Holocaust denial, don't we?
Yes, denial and distortion. People actively trying to erase or twist this history. It's incredibly dangerous because it attacks the truth and dishonors the victims.
The Urban Herald has highlighted global efforts to counter this through education, Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, UNESCO's work.
These institutions and countless others are vital. Their work in education, in preserving evidence, in research. It's about equipping people, especially young people, with the knowledge to understand what happened and why. It's not just about history. It's about understanding prejudice, human rights, the dangers of indifference, the importance of speaking out.
Now, social media, that's a complex factor the Urban Herald has looked at closely. A tool for remembrance, but also a problem.
It's absolutely a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's powerful for sharing survivor stories globally, for reaching new audiences, engaging young people. The Auschwitz Memorial's online presence, for example, is remarkable.
True. They do incredible work online.
But the flip side is that these platforms are also fertile ground for spreading denial, distortion, and vile anti-Semitic content.
Yeah, we've seen that. How does that happen?
Well, sometimes algorithms can amplify harmful stuff unintentionally, And some platforms, maybe like Telegram, have looser rules, becoming echo chambers for hate speech and conspiracy theories about the Holocaust. Fighting that online is a constant battle.
So as we approach this 80th anniversary, the Urban Herald's analysis really boils down to this. Why does the Holocaust still matter so much today, especially as the survivors are sadly leaving us?
That's the crucial question. As the living connection fades, the responsibility shifts to us, to the next generations, to carry the memory. The further away we get, the easier it is to forget, or for the lessons to feel less urgent. And we see new forms of hatred emerging, new targets. So connecting the dots between the Holocaust and contemporary prejudice, discrimination, violence, that's essential.
And ultimately, as the Urban Herald concludes, these lessons aren't just about Jewish history, are they? They're universal.
Absolutely. The Holocaust is a terrible warning about where exclusion, dehumanization, and unchecked power can lead. The mechanisms, propaganda, scapegoating, bystander apathy, erosion of rights, they aren't unique to the 1930s and 40s. We've seen other genocides since. Hatred finds new targets. So, the lessons about how fragile democracy can be, the power of lies, and the absolute need for moral courage, they are intensely relevant right now.
80 years on, this anniversary, as the Urban Herald has explored, it's a vital moment for us all to pause, to reflect, not just remember the past, but to look at our world now and confront the hatred and injustice we still see.
Indeed. It's a moment to ask ourselves, what kind of future are we building from these ashes? And as the Urban Herald's work consistently suggests, the answer has to start with remembering, with learning, and with acting. Ensuring never again isn't just a slogan, but a commitment.
A commitment we all share. If you want to explore this further, please do check out the resources on the Urban Herald website and look into the vital work being done by Holocaust museums and educational organizations worldwide. Thank you for joining us for this important discussion.